Sonia looked at herself in the mirror at the marks that remained on her face. Usually her husband was careful that no one noticed what he was doing. But this time he had gone too far and had no qualms. He went completely mad and didn't stop until he saw her on the ground. She woke up after several hours and remembering what had happened. Heartbroken, she burst into tears as she stroked the bulging belly she was carrying, making sure her baby was okay. Last night she tried to protect him above all else as she looked out for the man she'd married. That young man from high society who lived on appearances when in reality everything was a lie. Daniel was unsuccessful, but he was involved in dirty business and Sonia had found out. So he kept her quiet that way. The woman had married a loving man of a good family who was not the same man who frowned as he attacked. And that was when she realized that this man didn't care about anything and that she couldn't continue to put up with the situation that she experienced at home for a long time. At the beginning of the marriage, Sonia justified and wanted to believe that Daniel would change because of all the love she felt for him, as well as what would an important social circle in which they lived. Why was that frowned upon for a woman separate from her husband? But now things were different. She had to think about the daughter she was carrying. The woman was determined to get out of there, gathering her few belongings, when suddenly she felt as if a stream of water was running down her legs. She looked down, realizing that her daughter was on her way, and between whispers she asked her to wait a little longer. But the girl was determined to leave that day, so she had no choice but to call a sister from the church to come to her rescue immediately with the excuse that her husband couldn't because he was working. When Sonia finally arrived at the hospital, everything happened very quickly, and in less than expected. She was able to have her little girl in her arms. She had been born prematurely as a result of what was happening the day before, but no one knew, as the woman claimed that she carelessly fell while cleaning the house, and that was why she had marks on her face, as she also did not want her daughter's father to have problems. The woman was very upset now that she had her daughter in her arms, mainly because the man seemed so worried about them. When he finally made it to the hospital, he had a change of heart, and Sonia told herself that maybe he was sorry and should give him a second chance. In addition, he loved his daughter very much because, according to his words, he would create her in his image and likeness because the love he felt for her was genuine, since it would be she who would succeed him and to whom he would delegate each of his affairs. Sonia was calmer, as Daniel showed her that his treatment of her daughter was different. He had high expectations of her, and over time made his wife change her mind, thinking that her daughter should enjoy a life full of comfort, where she would not have to suffer from lack of money at home, something she had to face with great difficulty as a result of her father abandoning her. But Sonia finally opened her eyes suddenly, when one day she heard how hard her husband was with Alexandra, who was barely 6 years old, for which the woman confronted him, as the woman used to not care how he was with her, but not the attitude he took with his daughter. Sadness invaded Alexandra's soul when she heard her parents fight over her. The little girl was a disappointment to her father, and he let her know it on many occasions. He will always demand more from her, that she be smarter, prettier, kinder, more docile, but she was never able to give him what he always wanted. On the other hand, Sonia felt such an immense love for her daughter that she only cared about her happiness, something that she was clearly not achieving with the demands that her husband so harshly imposed on her. From that moment on, Sonia realized that her husband had no regard for her daughter, that with every word the father said, she became more and more anxious to fulfill his wishes, and her self-esteem was being affected. On many occasions, the little girl would not stop crying and would lock herself in her room, as she worked very hard for the people around her to see her as the perfect daughter that Daniel wanted. But the truth is, she just wanted to be like the other classmates at school. Tears rolled down her face because she didn't feel well enough, and she confessed this to her mother, who was her greatest confidant and friend. Then the woman realized that money and comfort were not an excuse to continue being unhappy, because in exchange, Alexandra, her little daughter, had to bear the pressure that he put on her. Then one night, while everyone was sleeping at home, Sophia tiptoed into Alexandra's room, who was sleeping. She lovingly woke up carrying some of her belongings. She marched hand in hand with her daughter along the dark path that led to the city in search of a better future. The woman rented a small room where she proposed to start from scratch, in freedom, and although she could not give her little girl all the luxuries that Daniel would, she could give her a lot of love and stability at home, as she considered that much more important than inheriting a large fortune from dirty dealings. The woman worked day and night to support her daughter, who unfortunately had to be alone within those four walls. Sonia knew it wasn't the best place to let a little girl alone, but at least that way she would have peace of mind and be able to live her quiet phase, away from that man who put a lot of pressure on her shoulders. But what the woman didn't count on is that Daniel would use all his influencers to look for her, and as soon as he found her, the man had a document saying that his wife had left home, taking their little daughter with her. Daniel really didn't care about Sonia's departure, nor his daughter, who was good for nothing and kept disappointing him. But what hurt his soul was the gossip of the people who made up his social circle. Besides, he wouldn't risk this woman telling anyone where his income came from, as he always kept up appearances. So he did everything possible to stay with Alexandra and send his wife behind bars, claiming that she had run away from home after robbing him of fortune he had saved with the help of important friends. The man managed to denounce Sonia, who did not have the opportunity to declare what she knew about him, since he had indicated that he was the future of a humble social class. Furthermore, for having taken their little daughter from her arms, that's how Sonia was judged and taken to prison, where she had to spend at least 10 years or return the money she had supposedly taken. But since all this was a lie, the woman didn't have a penny in her possession, nor a good lawyer to defend her. So she lost her freedom and the opportunity to see Alexandra grow up from that moment on. 7 long years passed. Little Alexandra had to put up with Daniel's resentment towards her mother, who told her that she had died when she ran away with another man, as he was not going to allow her to grow up in the hope of seeing her again. He would take care of it himself. The man swore that he would also make life impossible for her. Her father's words echoed in the girl's mind as she walked through the school corridors. He constantly demanded that she be the best in the class and also that she relate well socially so that her future day would be bright. She already has enough in terms of looks, which isn't very nice to others, so she should strive to stand out for her intelligence. Alexandra used to look in the mirror and became obsessed with her appearance after wearing those words from the man who should love her and not judge her. The truth is that she was very bad at studies and was rejected by many in that place. On the other hand, the only 2 friends she thought she had, and to whom she told all her problems, were completely false, as days ago she had heard them talking badly about her and her personal problems at home. It was clear that they were only approaching out of interest, due to the large sum of money her father had, because who wanted to be seen as the loser? The school reports reached her father, who was called by the principal. He had been understanding in front of her, but as soon as he got home, he faced Alexandra, who didn't have the courage to face him, because she knew very well what he would say to her. But hearing the disappointment in his voice, something in her heart broke, for all she aspired to was his approval. "You are good for nothing. What will my friends say when they find out I have you as a daughter? You are identical to your mother and will be a failure in the future." Those words weren't the only ones he addressed to her. The man had a deep hatred for his ex-wife, so poor Alexandra paid the duck. The girl prayed to heaven that her mother would take her with her, wishing her days on earth were over. She reached this point because she couldn't even bear to see herself in the mirror, which was seriously criticized by the man who fathered her. The girl almost always had a lost air and didn't behave like a girl her age who should have fun and have lots of friends. Instead, she pushed herself too hard to be able to accomplish everything. Because of this, she constantly slipped into a great depression when she didn't achieve something that none of the people belonging to her social circle had noticed. Alexandra went to and from school, and her routine was very marked. Her father burdened her with the various courses she had to take to achieve the perfection he talked about so much, without imagining that all this was giving the girl a wrong idea that would soon have consequences. Alexandra tried to get help, but she had no one to tell everything that she felt inside her heart. So one day, she went to the pharmacy where she bought medicine that was guaranteed to make her rest. The poor girl went home that day, where once again her father judged her for looking like her mother. She climbed the stairs despondently, having made the biggest decision of her entire life to sleep forever. Before drinking each of the medicines, Alexandra looked at her tearful and asked her mother to pick her up and finally take care of her. As when she was a little girl, she couldn't handle all the load she had with Daniel, so she lay down on the bed and closed her eyes, imagining that Sonia would come back to her and take her to happiness. That day, everything seemed lost for the girl, as no one knew the sad decision she had taken. Her father, as usual, was not interested in what she did with her time, so the house was completely alone. When suddenly someone looked through the window at the young woman, who was breathing slowly and with difficulty. She had lost consciousness, so she didn't know that an angel came back to save her. Alexandra was admitted to a medical center, and a woman who declined to give her information was in the waiting room praying for her speedy recovery. When Alexandra finally opened her eyes, she believed she had accomplished her mission, because in front of her she could see the face that had cried so much for years. that her mother, who was beside her bed taking care of her dreams, as she did when she was a little girl. But when she felt the strong grip of her hand, she realized reality from there. The girl shed tears in disbelief, trying to understand that her mother had not died, as she had been led to believe for so long. The woman calmed her daughter and promised that they would never part again. Outside, Sonia had managed to leave a few days ago after starting an investigation against her husband, and she had the feeling that her daughter was not feeling well with him, claiming that this was not the man he claimed to be. So she decided to collaborate with the authorities, confessing that he had business with people who weren't entirely good, and that was the only way he could sustain the finances he had. Thanks to this, she managed to be released earlier. And the first thing she did was visit her daughter, not caring that the judge hadn't given her carte blanche yet, because she had a bad feeling and was surprised by the fact that Alexandra had just made a sad decision. Finally, Sonia and her daughter were able to prove that Daniel was not the successful and intelligent man he appeared to be, but that he had made all the money he had thanks to dealing with people with a bad reputation, which led him to stay behind the scenes. Mother and daughter were able to meet again after so long, achieving that Alexandra could finally obtain the happiness she so desired. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us in yet another story. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in this mother's place. Big hug, and see you later.